working with so many families, and the families that I see that really thrive beyond grief is the families where the parent is addressing their grief, because no matter what else happens, at least the child's being modelled healthy grieving. Also, the children that have all of the information do better in their grief. So if there's any information that's withheld or that's maybe really sensitive around the topic of how they died, and they don't have all of the information throughout time, that just escalates.
Welcome to Don't Be Caught Dead, a podcast encouraging open conversations about dying and the death of a loved one. I'm your host, Catherine Ashton, founder of Critical Info, and I'm helping to bring your stories of death back to life. Because while you may not be ready to die, at least you can be prepared. Don't Be Caught Dead acknowledges the lands of the Kulin Nations and recognises their connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and First Nation peoples around the globe. James and Kristy Thomas founded Feel the Magic in 2013, driven by their personal experiences with grief and a mission to make sure no Australian child goes through grief alone. Both James and Kristy know firsthand how hard it is to heal after a loved one dies, James having experienced the death of both his father and mother, and Kristy the death of her brother. Working with mental health experts to develop the evidence-based camps, strategies and resources that Feel the Magic delivers, James and Kristy are dedicated to helping grieving kids heal, no matter where they live in Australia, from the city to the most isolated rural towns. Thanks for joining me today, Kristy and James. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Now, tell me, most people work through their grief in their own way, but most people don't start a charity and a camp for children who are grieving. How on earth did this come about?
Oh, you want to start, Kristy? That's a long story.
Not recommended would be my first statement to most people don't do that. But I'll let James start, because it really was I found it out of his idea and we sort of ran with it. So I'll hand it over to you, James.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess from my point of view, starting a charity, I thought of the idea of Feel the Magic in the happiest place on earth, which was Disneyland. That was back in 2012. And I remember, and I was, I'm sure we'll get into the story, but grieving the loss of my mum, selling my business, we ended up finding ourselves in America for a month, and Disneyland was on that itinerary. And it was there where I just thought of this idea to help kids who are grieving, to send them and their family on a beautiful trip to Disneyland. Just a feel good thing to do. From there, come back, worked at it. It evolved into this charity, and it just felt like I had no idea about charity other than donating to them. But it just felt like everything fell into place quite smoothly. Even our DGR status, the deductible gift recipient status, that fell into place quite quickly. And there was just this knowing within me that we were on the right path and this had to happen. And I don't know, it's hard to, whether it's intuition or why, but I just knew that this thing had to grow and we had to persist with it. We weren't really aware of the work that it would take. And in hindsight, looking back, it probably was one of the most enjoyable parts of my career, so to speak. There's a lot of sacrifices that need to be made, but why start a charity? Don't know. I just think it just fell into place, and we just knew that this thing had to be on. It's still one of our goals since way back then. Is this Feel the Magic will be a household name for grieving families. That's our ultimate goal.
And tell me about the name. Where did the name come from?
Yeah, look, I guess discovering the idea in Disneyland is that the whole place is magical. I don't know if you've been there yourself, but it's just.
No.
I guess for me, it's one of those places where it took me straight back to my childhood. Going through what I went through, losing mum on my birthday, walking through Disneyland just took me back to being a kid with my parents watching. We all grew up in Disney, I guess. Seeing characters that I completely forgot about, hearing songs from movies that I completely forgot about. And I just knew in that moment I was in the right place at the right time. So there was magic in the air. So when we come up with the idea, we come home and we were writing down names, and we just knew the word magic had to be in it. That was without question, and it was coming up, with words to surround that. And we stumbled across Feel the Magic, and we just went, yeah, that's it, because I guess in Disneyland you are feeling the magic, and in some sort of way there is magic to come from grief. I mean, that sounds a little bit more morbid, but if you really, grief is the hardest thing you're ever going to go through as a human being, in my humble opinion. And if you can embrace that, work through it, and when I say work through it, feel it, live it, express it, all the hard stuff that we've been taught to avoid, there is magic on the other side, whether that's, meeting a brand new community like Feel the Magic, or whether it's just, knowing full well in yourself that you've overcome the hardest thing you'll ever go through in your life, and nothing else will seem to bother you. That's the message we portray with our kids anyway.
And when you were walking through Disneyland during that time, did it remind you all of those memories of when you were a kid and when you were safe and the world was like you're saying, magical,
Yeah. Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. Safe is exactly how I felt. It almost felt like a warm blanket walking through Disneyland, because it was the safety of sitting on the lounge with mum and dad either side of me. And I'm an only child, so there was just the three of us. There was nothing better. And even as a father now, the movie nights are quite a special thing, because I remember them, like they were yesterday. So I'd like to pass that down to my boys. But there is that, safety is a beautiful word to use.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, and it evokes a really lovely imagery. And you both alluded to the fact that there's been challenging times. So you're just about to celebrate your 10th anniversary next year. So how has the camp evolved during that time, and what programs do you now offer?
I'll take that one. So we started with Disneyland trips. We called them Magic Journeys. And what we realised was that each of the families that were going on the journey and coming back, they were actually getting so much value out of creating their own little community. So in the end, we sent overall 14 families to the Disney experience, and they all just became this beautiful, tight-knit community. And we started to think, how can we best make impact with the funds that we're raising to support these families? And that's where Camp Magic was born. So Camp Magic was our signature program. It's 2.5 days of grief education for kids aged 7 to 17. And basically they come to camp and they're matched with an adult mentor for the whole duration of camp. And that volunteer will then sort of sit beside them throughout their process throughout the weekend. So the weekend's sort of broken up into sections of psychoeducational therapeutic sessions where they learn about healthy grieving, in particular self-soothing tools and emotional regulation type activities. And they get to connect with other kids just like them, which is really important. So we do that, but then we sort of cuddle each of those sessions with team building activities, rock climbing or canoeing or high rope type activities in a recreational setting. So they're having a lot of fun at the same time. So they're just, connecting with each other. And most kids will say they've never met any other kids that are like them. So they feel quite isolated in their grief. So coming to camp, they just meet upwards of 60 other kids who are similar to them, and it can just change their world to go, I'm not the only one, or there's other people going through the same thing as me. So that was what we did for quite a few years. I think 5 years we were solid Camp Magic. We did them in New South Wales. We expanded out to ACT and then Victoria. And then we decided that we wanted to introduce other programs because we knew we could provide more support. So Camp Magic became so popular that we couldn't service all of the kids that wanted to come. So we introduced a one-day camp. Yeah.
Becoming too popular.
Becoming too popular, yeah, because it's 1 in 20 kids who will lose a parent before the age of 18 here in Australia, which is a high number. And we support kids who have lost a sibling as well as a parent or guardian. So
wow, those figures are huge. Like
huge.
1 in 20.
And that's not including sibling loss. So it would be significantly higher, I would imagine. And then when they come to camp, they have this amazing experience, and what we wanted to do then was offer other opportunities for them to just connect. It's just really important for them to have relationships and a community. So we have now a one-day camp that lots of kids come to first. So their first interaction with us is come to a family day camp. The whole family comes. We give them a little bit of grief education. We give them lots of connection. We have some family time. We do arts. We do music. But generally speaking, they'll leave feeling lighter and happier than they came. And then we also, during COVID, introduced online program, which is called our Healthy Grieving program. It's delivered 4 hours online over a weekend period. So they'll do 2 one-hour sessions on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. And that also goes a little bit more in depth into our therapeutic processes. So then by the time they get to Camp Magic, they've had 1 or 2 interactions with us already. And so that process into Camp Magic is much smoother because they're comfortable with us already. They're familiar with some of our processes already. And so they're, kind of firing, ready to go. Whereas not most kids, but a lot of kids who are grieving really experience separation anxiety from either their surviving parent or their family because, unfortunately, they're fearful of death. So we've kind of expanded out so that we can provide more support. Obviously, we have a million other things that we would love to do, but it's all, fundraising is hard. It's difficult. So we've grown, we've got lots of kids, and we've got endless amounts of kids wanting to come to our Camp Magic program. So that's how much what we've achieved in those 10 years.
That is a lot that you've achieved in those 10 years. And tell me, when you've modified the program for having that sort of a small, bite-sized introduction to Feel the Magic, and then when they actually come on a camp, what has been the difference that you've seen with just changing the way in which you've programmed?
Oh, huge difference. And I put it down to a couple of things that we've introduced. Back in the day when we had our first ever Camp Magics, it was all me. I was the intake person. I was the point of contact. I was the person on camp who looked after everything logistically. And now we have a team that work in that area. So we also have a psychologist who's on call. So what happens is when a family is taken into our community, they just get much more thorough. We get more thorough information on who they are, what their needs are, and specifically we kind of really get detailed information so that when we do get to Camp Magic, the difference, because they've come through that process, is there's a lot less heightened kids at a camp. There's no surprises because we know the kids. We know what to expect because we've already had those interactions, whereas sometimes in the past going in blindly, we'd be having to manage a lot of different kinds of things because we didn't have all the information. So, that growth is so imperative to the safety of the child and to have such a positive experience for the parent guardian who's grieving as well. So it's not just the kids who are struggling.
Yeah, and tell me just, where does that process start, where it's the one-day camp when the family comes?
Mm-hmm.
So is it the virtual program, then that, or just
it could be one or the other, depending on the availability of programs coming up throughout the year. So with the Healthy Grieving program, that's the online one. That one we can guarantee you'd get into within a 3-month period because we have a program every month, different age groups. So that means that that's can be accessed really quickly. And then the family day camps are more spread out because we have more participants on the day. So it would be either one or the other. And if a parent is concerned about doing it online, they'll wait for the family day camp so they can all come together.
Yeah, wow. And tell me, how big's the team now, Kristy?
Oh, gosh, exactly. I don't know. Is it 8 of us, I think we have, James?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah,
the volunteer base is in the hundreds.
Yeah, so there's 8
Hundreds.
in a team. Most of us work part-time, so we all, do a few days here and there. But then our volunteers, so at any one camp, we would have upwards of 70 volunteers who lead the program, mentor the kids, as well as all of the facilitation that happens over the weekend. They're all trained volunteers as well. So it's an incredible team that we have, majority of volunteers at this point. Yeah.
That's phenomenal. And tell me, you'd have to have a program for those volunteers and you'd have to recruit those volunteers. Tell me about that process, because that in itself is a job alone.
Yes, it really is. Recruitment is, we've sort of gone a couple of avenues. One being partnering with organisations. So we've partnered with a couple of corporates over the years who donate funds, and then in return they send their employees to come and have this incredible experience. So that's part of a recruitment plan. We've also partnered with 2 separate universities, one here in Sydney, New South Wales, and one in Victoria, Monash University, where we have the psychology students come and mentor as part of collecting hours of their service. But that's been great. But what's even better is those uni students come back. So they do their hours, and then we seem to be retaining a lot of them just based on they're obviously having a really positive experience and they come again. So our biggest issue, I would say, is recruitment of males. We find quite difficult. That's always a bit of a push to each camp.
And why do you think that is a challenge? Have you recently had a loved one die or know someone who has? We recognise this time can be very challenging for you, and you can feel quite vulnerable and not know what to do. We certainly didn't know what to do. That's why we have developed a resource for you called My Loved One Has Died, What Do I Do Now? This resource guides you through the steps you need to take in the first few hours, days, weeks and months after a loved one has died. A link to the guide, My Loved One Has Died, What Do I Do Now? Can be found in the show notes of this episode. Talking openly about death and grief can sometimes be triggering. If you find you need support, please reach out to our support services and the bereavement organisations listed on our resource hub. All links are in the show notes of this episode.
I think there's many reasons. From a male's perspective, I think the fear of being alone with kids, I think that would scare you. Yeah, I guess the responsibility, work, being away from your own family. However, with the training we do provide our mentors, they're fully equipped, and when they go into camp, they know the rule of 3. They're quite supported in any of their fears or concerns that they may have.
And so tell me, what was that, the rule of 3?
The rule of 3, so you never ever to be alone with your camper. So if, for example, if I was my little camper Johnny and he had the bathroom, I wouldn't just go up and take him by myself. I would actually ask another mentor and their camper to come with us. Yep. And it's quite strict. The culture we've built, everyone sticks to that. And if anyone doesn't, then they are immediately reported. So it's not dobbing, it's actually doing the right thing by the mentors and the kids themselves.
And so, yeah, you've got, I suppose for you, you've got that added layer of those concerns, and that's already on top of the concerns that people have and the awkwardness people have about grief and talking about death. So your volunteer program must be quite intensive when you're providing that training. And so your volunteers are then known as mentors, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, so they go through well, actually, Kristy, I'll let you explain that because it's been a while since I've been to a mentor training, but yeah, they're definitely well equipped.
Yeah, over the years we've built on that volunteer recruitment in the way that we bring them in. So firstly, they have to get all of their checks done. They're required to have 100 points of ID signed by the JP, which I know can be a barrier for a lot of people coming in straight off the bat, because it does require you to go and do something that's not easy, but we require it because we absolutely, like, child protection to us is number one, because if we let anything slip, then we won't be able to do this work, which is so needed. So they go through that rigorous identification process. Then they're required to always have a Working with Children check or equivalent to their state. I think it's a blue card in other states. And then they also need to update their National Criminal History check every 12 months, which requires they need to have one valid every 12 months. And then they are required to complete an online e-learning course, which takes anywhere from sort of 45 minutes to an hour and a half for them to complete, which addresses really sort of key elements like child protection, disclosure, how to keep themselves safe, what to say to a grieving child, really, really detailed information. So then when they show up for the face-to-face, we deliver it online and in-person training, which goes for about 5 hours. They're already equipped with all that backhand knowledge. So then when they come into training, they can actually have a real experience of what it's going to be like at camp. So we show them some of the activities that they'll participate with the kids. We talk about emotional literacy and what that means. We go hard in on self-care because we know it's important for them to be looking after themselves first before they can support a child. And then they're ready for camp. And then pre-camp they do lots of meetings, but they can start as a mentor, but we do have other sort of leadership positions that they can then move into. So after they've done a few camps, so we have other opportunities for mentors to then grow in the space of volunteering. So we can sort of upskill them to become facilitators or leaders of our program, so at camps. And then we also train them to be facilitators online. So, yeah, we really provide a place for them. If they want to just stay being a mentor, that's absolutely fine. But if they want to grow into something and really give back, then there's an opportunity as well, which we've found has been really beneficial for them because honestly, it's so good for a lot of them work corporately and they say to me, this is a place where I can come and I know I'm making a difference outside of my job. And it looks great on their resume. And I do know lots of people have moved into jobs that they probably wouldn't have looked at if they weren't volunteers for Feel the Magic. So, yeah, I love that we have that progression for them as well.
Yeah, and that's something that really interests me. I've worked with volunteers in my previous role at the Royal Botanic Gardens, and that's something that is always a challenge, is to be able to provide that progression, because really a lot of the roles that volunteers are engaged for, there isn't that career progression or that ability to step up. So that's amazing that you can provide that opportunity. Mm-hmm. So tell me, all relationships have their challenges. You're married and also obviously co-founders of Feel the Magic. How do we ensure that you have, you talked about self-care with the volunteers earlier. How do you ensure about boundaries and what stays professional, private, and allow time for your own self-care?
I'll start then. I think in the early days, there's no such thing because you're starting it from home.
No such thing as boundaries?
Or from a working – you talking about separating work and personal life?
It was all intertwined in the beginning.
Yeah.
There's no start or end. It's just all-encompassing. Yeah.
So Feel the Magic, we immersed ourselves in Feel the Magic, especially for at least the first 5-6 years. It was – we lived and breathed it. It was in our house. It was – we had volunteers stay at our house. We had our garage full. And just over time, it evolved. And, I always tell people when we had the office downstairs in our old house in Sydney, you'd have to walk past the office to go upstairs to go to bed. And so many times I'd be walking past and you hear the email notification. You go, I'll just quickly check that. And then an hour and a half later, you're like, oh, God, I'm going to go to bed now. That sort of stuff. But I think in any bit, whether it's a non-profit or a business, you just got to do that. I think if you want to be successful, or you want your business to be successful, you've got to get your hands dirty. From an emotional standpoint, I think as we've matured and we've got our own little family now, I think there's many times where Kristy will say, "Hey, that's enough now. We won't talk about it at dinner," and then we won't talk about it. I think it's just having those strict rules in place because, and actually for me, I've been away for the last couple of years, away from Feel the Magic altogether. So I think that made the talking about Feel the Magic a lot easier as well. Not talking about Feel the Magic a lot easier.
Yeah, and
the crux of it was we found it really difficult in the beginning to separate the two. But I think as we had 2 small kids, we realised, we have to switch this off sometimes. And now we're much better at drawing the line. And I would say we work well together, and we always have done, because we have completely separate roles within our business. So I was programs and people, and James was fundraising and relationships with philanthropists and, out speaking about Feel the Magic. So, we just made it work, didn't we?
Yeah, and I think you highlighted the important thing is having your own roles, not crossing paths. Like if I was trying to do programs and Kristy was trying to do parts of fundraising, or we were trying to tell each other how to do our jobs, it would have erupted many times over. But I think we just stayed in our own lane and supported each other when we needed to. But again, I think our priorities changed really. Sorry, our priorities really changed once we had new babies. I think you realise that time is precious, and they do need your time. So I think, if I speak for myself organically, I kind of didn't want to be answering emails at 11 o'clock at night. I wanted to be in bed because I needed to get up the next morning because one of my boys would have been waking up early.
Yeah,
but again, it comes with maturity it comes with maturity and time and circumstances, I guess. But I'll never regret the effort we put in, especially in those first few years, because you need to do that. And like I said, in any business or charity, you have to put in the hard work.
That's something that is really impressive, is that commitment at that early stage. Because if you hadn't actually put that commitment in, do you think you would be where you are today?
No, not at all. Because there was many times there wasn't. Sorry, let me rephrase that. There wasn't a day where we thought, this isn't working, let's stop. But there were plenty of days of going, this is hard. Should we keep going? And again, starting a charity, there's no money in it. If this was our business, we'd be very happy, very happy with the outcome. But I guess our reward is the difference we've made, so to speak. So it is I think going back to what I originally said at the start, that knowing that this, I don't know, it's hard to explain, that knowing that you're on the right journey doing something, and just to trust and keep going with it. It's a feeling I haven't had much in my whole life. I just think this needed to be done.
There was quite a few moments in time where James would be like, that's it, I'm throwing in the towel. And we'd no, talk him through it. And then vice versa. I'd be like, oh, no, we can't do this anymore. It's too hard. And he'd be like, no. So we had the benefit of that support of helping each other through the tough times. And also, even though it was hard, James said it before, and I think this really wraps up a little bit of the magic that happened, because I truly believe there were people upstairs orchestrating to support. Because when we came back and said we were going to start a charity, I don't think there was any one person that said, oh, yeah, that's a great idea, do that. Most people were like, oh, okay. Some people, we even reached out to people who had charities and they strongly advised not. And it's really hard to get your DGR status and it's really hard to register. And we just didn't find we didn't have those roadblocks. And so they were kind of sparks of energy to go, oh, this is obviously worthy, let's keep going. So we just had those moments in time, and we'd, stumble across people who would donate or become, we've got a founding philanthropist who's been with us the whole time. And even the way that fell into place was we met this person who met that person, and then you can't plan for those events to happen. And there were lots of those that made us think, okay, this is meant to be, let's keep going. So
yeah,
that's encouraging, I have to say, because I'm only not even a year in yet, and at times it can feel quite isolated or isolating, I should say, and sometimes you can't see light at the end of the tunnel. So it's encouraging. It sounds like that if someone is doing something that they're doing for purpose, that each little part of the jigsaw puzzle should be an achievement, I suppose. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. And it's hard to articulate, I've got to say, because it is that inner knowing that you've got to keep going. And I think if you ever are blessed enough to have that knowing, then keep going even during because the hard days are going to be there no matter what.
The hard days are what make it satisfying too at the end. Oh, wow, we did that. We got through that. We also have, over the years, been surrounded and supported by the most incredible volunteer base that you could imagine. So without that support, we wouldn't have got anywhere near where we are either. It's that volunteer base that keeps us going and deliver our programs to top-notch programs, because we have those people.
Yeah.
And
sorry, you go.
No, go, James.
Oh, I was just going to say it's a charity that makes sense, and I think everyone, the 1 in 20 that the kids that lose someone, but there's so many adults out there that have either lost as a child or an adult that don't necessarily know how to talk about it or can relate. So it's a relatable cause. It is an easy sell because, I think Kristy said it earlier that volunteers come to our organisation knowing they're making a difference. I always use an example every time whenever I did a talk that I used to donate to a charity. I used to have a signwriting business, but pre-Feel the Magic. And I'd have charities ringing me all the time, every day, at least 5 or 6 times a day. And it's overwhelmingly annoying. You think, far out I'm charitable, but I'm not that charitable. And I did sign up to a monthly membership with one charity. I won't mention the name. And I donated, I think it was $60 a month, which, it's not huge money, but surely over a number of years that makes a difference to someone. And not once did I ever know where my money went. I didn't even think I claimed it on tax. It was just this money that was going out every day. So I always thought that you've got to do it different. You can't just be a charity and just take people's money. You've got to provide that experience, and then you might be able to ask for some sort of dollars in exchange. And what we've created organically, I must say, with our volunteer base is they get just as much out of the work we do than our kids do, as much as the kids do. because they can see the difference they've made. They've connected with other adults who love being there. And it's just this community and culture that is supportive. And, what I love seeing is there's a whole group of mentors that were bereaved kids, and they've come together as adults that they never would have met anyone else in their situation if it wasn't for Feel the Magic. So, yeah, I just love seeing the connections that have been made that spread far and wide through the organisation, which, again, definitely wasn't our intention at the start.
You've developed quite the community.
Absolutely. Yep.
And James, you were talking about how your mother had passed away, and that was one of the catalysts that led to you starting the charity. And that wasn't the only one, though, was it?
Yeah, I lost my dad at 25 as a young adult. Dad had cancer for 2 and a bit years, and he died in I think it was April 2005. And it was at Dad's funeral. It's funny. I share this, if I may share this story. I've had 3 major losses in my life. The first was Dad's in 2005 at age 25. I didn't really grieve. I think I shed 1 tear, and then as soon as the funeral was over and the wake was over, I was in action mode because I wanted to take care of Mum. Mum was living in Queensland. We were living in Sydney. I wanted to move Mum down. So it kind of gave me, and being 25, I wasn't really taking life too serious. So it was almost like I actually felt a shift in my brain to mature, and then we set out on a path to house my mum down here with us. And that was the journey. But, I kind of got caught up in this material world and making good money, and then all of a sudden lost Mum unexpectedly on my 31st birthday. So that was my second loss, and that was horrific. It was the shock, and I tried to suppress that and keep going forward, but it wasn't working. And that pain lasted for about 2 years, purely because I wasn't dealing with it or wasn't really talking about it, and I didn't know how to deal with it. So I just thought the best thing to do was try to work it away. And then obviously Feel the Magic's founded and all that great stuff that comes with it. But last year on Christmas Eve, I lost my little mate Joey, who's my 8.5-year-old Chihuahua, and he was my best mate, and he died. Something bit him, and he had an anaphylactic reaction on Christmas Eve night, and that was devastating. Joey was there when we first founded Feel the Magic. No, sorry, he was a couple of years in. So when we were in the building stage, Joey was just always with me, always on my lap, or he was on my desk sometimes because he was so little. But he was just there, and he was a big personality. And to have him taken on Christmas Eve was gut-wrenching. And I cried. As much as I wanted to avoid it, I cried 9 days straight for Joey. But I've got to say, after the 9 days, I actually felt lighter, more accepting. So it was 3 different experiences where Joey was just, it ripped my heart out. I dealt with it, which in a way that I feel is the right way to grieve. Mum's was a 2-year journey of self-destruction and self-sabotage because I didn't want to deal with it. And Dad was just, in a way, stoic because I thought, right, that's it, funeral's done, let's get on with things. I had to mature. So there's 3 different experiences, but I honestly feel like from the lessons I've learned with Feel the Magic, the way I've dealt with Joey, I can look back on and feel proud because that's how a healthy grieving process should look like. And that was my little dog. Yeah.
But it's interesting, though, because sometimes that is what it takes, is the unconditional love that you get from a pet.
Yeah.
That probably sometimes hits us the hardest because we don't have all of that other emotional baggage with it, and I find that, when we had to, our cat got quite sick and we had to make the decision to euthanize her, and it was really hard to come back into the house because you don't realise how much they're there until they're not, and I think it's that constant, as you hear my cat in the background, another one, it is that constant, companionship that you do find, and just that loyalty and love. So, sometimes I'm not surprised when people say that they are really, really emotionally affected by and find that they grieve the most when their pet dies.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very sad. Very sad.
And Kristy, you've had your own experience.
Yeah, so I lost my brother Corey to leukemia when I was a young girl. So I was only 2 when he left. However, the impact, I think what impacted me the most is living in a family that's grieving was really difficult. So at the time, he was certainly my best friend. I was only a toddler, but he was sort of bound to a chair. And anything I'm sharing is stuff that I've heard secondhand, which is tricky as well. I don't have my own memories of him. It's all secondhand and it's photos and things like that. But yeah, according to Mum, I would lay in his lap most days while he was really sick, and then one day he was gone. And so developmentally I wasn't able to understand what happened. I just knew there was a deep loss there. And that kind of didn't really surface for me till I was about 20. And then at that time I sought, therapeutic support, and I still do, because it has had such an impact on my life. And so that's kind of my connection and dedication to these grieving kids, is that my family could really have used support throughout that time when he passed away, because no one knows what to do or say or how to move on. And, everyone in my family, there's mum, dad and older sister. So my brother was in between the two of us. Yeah, we've all dealt with our grief in different ways, and positive and negative. And so, yeah, to be able to give back and support kids. And also I have the benefit of we support a lot of kids who don't have physical memories of their family member who's died. So being able to share that and relate to them, tell them they're not alone, is, something really special that forever I'll be proud of that we get to do. It's quite emotional, but worthy. So
that's really beautiful. It's something that I hadn't thought of, was the physical memory.
Mm.
Yeah, and just that age, or that's really special. Thank you for both sharing your stories. From your experience, what do you think that you find the most challenging for families when they come to you?
Most challenging is tricky because there's, a variety of things. But I think for a parent, it's the struggle of being in so much pain yourself. And as a parent myself, I think we always find it easy to push us out our own, but when it comes to our child's pain, we're all over it. And so I think it takes a while for the parent to work through their own grief, because they're so focused on making sure their child's okay, and they just don't know what to do. So they don't know how to help their kids, and so that's where we come in to support them. But what I know from working with so many families, and the families that I see that really thrive beyond grief, is the families where the parent is addressing their grief first, because no matter what else happens, at least the child's being modelled healthy grieving. Also, the children have all of the information do better in their grief. So if there's any information that's withheld, or that's maybe really sensitive around the topic of how they died, and they don't have all of the information throughout time, that just escalates. Children are very intuitive and they get it. They know they don't have all the information, and they have a really clever way of making it about them. It must have been because of me. And yeah, so I would say the biggest challenge is, trying to support the parent to support themselves, and then to not just focus on the kids, that they're important too. Kids are naturally amazing at grieving. When they come into our space, we create a safe space for them. They just naturally express themselves and then move on, go and play footy. and then come back into the group and express themselves and then, oh, okay, I'm good with that now. Let's go hang out and smile and laugh. And it's not that, you need to have grief and the presence of grief means there's no happiness. They do really well at saying, I'm grieving and I'm enjoying this moment. I'm grieving and I'm happy. And I think as adults, we find it really hard to articulate in our brain that it's okay to be both. When we're grieving, that there's so much sadness and so much pain, but it's still okay to be happy or joyful, or they can coexist at any one time.
I would say from my experience, it's the isolation that grief presents families. So, kids not knowing anyone else in their situation other than their siblings, and widowed parents that are doing this alone. They don't know anyone else. And because we live in a society where no one really knows what to say or do, they're usually, not outcast is probably a bit dramatic, but they are avoided because no one knows what to say, so they don't want to say the wrong thing. So, there's been heaps of, I know families that have said that, their closest friends would be walking towards each other and they'd cross the street just to avoid them, just to avoid an awkward conversation. And a lack of understanding, another example of school teachers wondering what's wrong with the kid or children because they're not themselves, and it's only been 6 months since their family member has died. So just that lack of emotional intelligence that influential people in their life should know better and should accommodate a lot better, but they don't. I was told a story by a parent where a child was continually playing up at school, and the teacher called the mother, and she said, your son's doing this, that, and the other. Is there anything going on? She said, yeah, his dad's died. She said, yeah, but that was 6 months ago. Is there anything else that's happened? That to me, you shouldn't be in that. You shouldn't be a teacher if that's your level of emotional intelligence. If you think in 6 months' time a young man is meant to get over his dad, you're kidding yourself. And that also just cements for that boy that he's different, that his life's in a bit of a shambles, and he's acting that out. So who is there to support that child, and who is there to support that teacher so she can know better? And there's multiple stories that I've heard over the years just like that, where just, come on, let's get over it. And to be fair, when I lost my dad, that's how I felt. I've got to get over this. So it's this unspoken rule that you just need to get on with it. But there's a better way to do it, because the last thing we want is people just trying to get over it, and all of a sudden they're teenagers, they're young adults, and they're drinking too much and it comes out in the wrong ways, or they're taking drugs and it comes out in the wrong ways. So they're best learning the tools necessary now so that they are healthy, functioning human beings. But that takes a lot of understanding from all angles.
And there is some really amazing resources that you have on your website, and also there's some additional resources on the Critical Info website that we'll put in the show notes, where people can get assistance when they're dealing with grieving, and also about how to speak to someone, who is grieving, and how to have a conversation, because at the end of the day, they're still the same person that you actually went to the footy with, or, watched the sidelines on the kids play soccer. So, yeah, we'll definitely share those.
Awesome.
Now, you've engaged Huber Social to write a social impact report from 2017 to 2020 on the work that you've done. What did you learn from these reports, and how have the findings impacted the work that you do?
So we've engaged with Huber Social right up until, we're still engaged with Huber Social to do social impact reports, because it was really important for us to make sure that we were hearing from the horse's mouth whether or not we're actually making an impact on the well-being of our beautiful kids that come through. So the way that we've used the information is to ensure that the outcomes that we've laid out, we're actually meeting and improving their well-being. over time. So through the surveys, they do a pre-camp, they do a post-camp, and then a 3-month follow-up. So we can really lay out the scope of the impact as well. It's really important for us to make sure that we're not just sending them home and then it's out the window. So, because one of the key things is that we empower them with the tools, practical ones, easy ones that they can do anywhere at any time to self-soothe and self-regulate. And so that 3-month survey just sort of checks in to make sure we're meeting that requirement of our outcome. But yeah, it's incredible to see the increase in their well-being overall when they come through our camp program to not doing the program. So that's been really important for us.
And has there been anything that you've learned through those studies that you've gone, oh, okay, we need to modify here or add here?
I mean, it depends. There's not been a lot of modification. The modifications probably, when it comes to the content at camp, that has been pretty consistent throughout. Of course, we add in different fun activities to still meet the same outcomes, but the outcomes of camp have been the same consistently throughout time. What we have improved on through these surveys is the pre- and post-camp follow-ups or introductions. So building their capacity pre-camp and then following up post is making sure that they're supported in a holistic way and not just while they're at camps. So I think that's really informed how much information they need coming into camp. So rather than maybe having 2 touch points with us, they now have a series of touch points coming into a camp, but every person has every parent has a phone call with our intake person that goes, anywhere between half an hour and an hour, where the parent can tell their story and talk about their children. And that implementation has changed the scope of the way the kids come in, because now we're really clear about what the kids' needs are, where they're at with their grief, what do they need, and do they need extra support coming in. So, often if kids have any special needs, like we have a lot of kids come through with neurodivergence of some sort, and so some of those kids need just a little extra support, and because we've identified that really early, we can put those in place for them to have a really positive experience. So I think that's been the most informed thing. There's been a couple of findings of late, especially we haven't released the findings from the last year. We're just finishing off the report, but the report from 2023 had an increase of anxiety and throughout the camp process. And as we sort of delved deeper into those findings, we realised, it's actually not that anxiety wasn't present before they're coming to camp. It's that they're actually addressing it when they come to camp. So when they come in, there's a place for them to allow that to come up, talk it through, and then they have their strategy. Because, yes, while there's the presence of anxiety while they're at camp, the level of their ability or their knowledge that has improved around seeking help, self-soothing, self-regulation has increased. So, yes, we've heightened them slightly. There's the presence of emotions, but we shouldn't be scared of those. Like, that's what we want. We want their emotions to boil up so they can identify them, know what to do with them, and if they can't do anything themselves, who to ask for help. So, yeah, there's lots of information that we get from the social reports. It's really important to pick them apart sometimes because, you could look at that, they're anxious, but no, once you pick it apart and then you level it out with their increased ability to know where to get help, you're like, we're meeting the outcomes here. So, yeah.
That's great that you're, sort of getting children at that age where they really need, it's so good that they're listening to their physical responses and then becoming aware of them and then sort of voicing what they are, and the fact that you're giving them that opportunity. And I love the fact that your intake person is having a call with one of the parents or carers before the kids come in. Like, that might be the only time that someone's actually had an hour-long conversation with that person. Would that be correct in saying?
I would think that's correct. And I don't want to generalize, but parents love the outlet because maybe they don't have someone they can just tell all of the horrible stuff to that doesn't feel uncomfortable. Like our intake person, she would hear like story after story after week, but just having that one person to listen who gets it, doesn't judge, hasn't got any emotional attachment to the outcome. Like, it really is a beautiful, safe space for them to share. And also they love to give all the information because they want the best for their child. So the opportunity to be able to share every detail about their child and where they're at and how they need support is really, really beneficial for them.
And just that healing that must be able to happen because of that, feeling that this is the one way in which I can help my child is by sharing all of this. You know, for me, if I'm thinking about how I would feel like at least I'm helping in that way to share all of that information.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
As a parent too, handing over the responsibility. You know, when you send your child to school and you want to feel confident the school teacher is going to look after them and give them the best education, it's the same thing. You want, like, we've just sent our 6-year-old to school this year and we were so pleased to be able to give them all the information, all these quirks, all the things that he's really great at, and we felt really supported by being able to give all the information. And so we've had that experience recently, so knowing that our parents, because then they're also not responsible. As a parent, we're not 100% responsible for our kids either. You know, we've got to make sure they're okay and look after them. But when it comes to their emotional ability to heal and go through this process, it must feel such a relief to be able to say, okay, can you take care of that part for me and just tell me what I have to do at the end, which is what we do. We provide the parents an opportunity to come to workshops during the camp. So they come, once they drop their kids off, we sort of usher them into their own room. So they have a bit of downtime because often they're upset about leaving their kids sometimes too, and there's a safe space for them. And then when they come back on the Sunday, we teach them all of the tools that we've taught the kids. So then when they go home, they've got this combined knowledge and they can sort of thrive once they get back into their environment and they've got all the tools to then the parent can say, oh, have you measured what number are you? And the kid can identify where they're at. So they've got a shared language to then move through hard things.
That is really beautiful. It's such a holistic approach that you've taken to, you know, helping families deal with grief. It's really beautiful to hear the stories and the things that you take families through. How do people get referred to you for a camp or, you know, starting off with the virtual sessions? How does that happen?
It's really easy to come. So it's literally a link on the website any parent or social worker or school teacher can fill out. So if you want to refer someone, there's a portal for that. And if you are a parent seeking advice, you can fill out that. And Lauren, who's our intake, she will be back in touch with you within 72 hours, usually a lot quicker, but we just, you know, buffer it out in case. But she gets in contact with anyone who fills out a form and they actually have the option to book a call directly with Lauren straight away. So that's out of the way. Or they can do it via email. So we even ask them what's the best way they want to communicate. Some people want text. Some people don't want to talk because they're not up for it. But, yeah, the referral system is really simple. And then Lauren will sort of map out the journey for the parent to say, okay, well, here's where you're at, this is what we've got coming up, and it's kind of that simple. The parent does need to fill out a detailed application form so that we have all the information, but beyond that, it's quite simple.
And you make it your task to sort of say, no matter where they live in Australia, from city to the most isolated rural town, you will make the camp available to them.
Absolutely, yeah. And
that's a pretty mighty task.
Any child can access the online program. We've had children who have been quite remote who are out of home care as well, where the carer might set up online for them. We've even had schools reach out where they've then sent home a laptop with the child so they could access us online. So the online is honestly a game changer, because it does mean that anyone nationally can get into one of our programs within a 3-month period.
Thanks to COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And tell me, how can someone support the amazing work that you're doing?
Yeah, there's many ways. We're always, I guess, taking the analogy of we give something first and then ask. I would love to offer my services to come and speak to your organisation, or Kristy, come and speak to the organisation. That can be done virtually or in person. Come speak to the team. I would encourage anyone to come along and try out to be a mentor. And then if that doesn't change your life, then, I don't know what will. But there's, we have events throughout the year, golf day, we've got spin-a-thon, we've got a magic ride. Usually we have a gala event, but we're parking that for this year. But we are looking for, the whole mission here is sustainability. So, whether it's a corporate that have been impacted by grief or feel the magic, we would love to just make it a win-win. We need corporate dollars, we need philanthropic dollars, and we just need that consistency to create sustainability, because what we do does change lives, and you can see firsthand where your dollars are going. So that's how you can support, and all the information's on our website.
Fantastic. And tell me, given your personal experience and from the scenarios that you've been talking about, how can people just be good allies? How can they just, have the conversation so people aren't feeling like they're isolated or they're being ostracised? Talk me through that.
Yeah, I'll just say it from a male's perspective for the male listeners, and I'll let Kristy elaborate far deeper than I can. We make it harder than what it needs to be. So simply by being there. So from a mate's point of view, if I had a mate who'd lost his child, I wouldn't overdo it. I wouldn't need to overdo it. He just needs to know I'm there. So whether I'm just in the vicinity of him or I'm by his side, take him out, just let him be. And then 9 times out of 10, they will regurgitate what they're feeling. You don't have to have the answers. You don't have to, you don't have to go way above and beyond to make an impact. Just them knowing that you're there is more than enough, and anything else is a bonus. So even if it's just a side hug, around the shoulder, just to let them know you're there, and that's all it is. You just need to know that someone's got your back, and that you can rely on someone other than your loved ones who are also grieving. So just be present. That's plain and simple.
Yeah, from my point of view, it's a bit more practical in that, saying something is better than saying nothing. Getting it wrong is better than not getting it right. So I didn't say that right. Getting it wrong is better than not trying, because, just from all the interactions I've had, a lot of people express that, people they thought they were really close with fall off the wagon, and then people they had no idea just come out of the woodworks for support. And the way they come out of the woodwork is by offering support. Now, I think being really practical about saying to a grieving person, how can I help you? You're probably going to get a response like, I don't know, because often their brain is too full to really even understand. So really thinking about you and your own family and what you do have to offer is probably the best thing. So instead of saying, how can I help you, saying, hey, I could do X, Y, Z for you, and just work that in. So I know if it's a single mum or dad, a single parent, often school pickups or drop-offs could be really supportive. The old cliche of dropping off a meal, honestly, is a really beautiful thing. And I'm not just talking about in the first few weeks or 6 weeks. Support really needs to extend out. Like maybe if you dropped a meal once a month for a year, because they just don't have capacity to think about food, and being healthy and all those things do make a difference. So just thinking about what capacity as a person you do have to offer. It might be a skill set that you have, like offering to MC at the wake, or baking food, or if you're a lawyer, helping get affairs in order. It's just the smallest of things, whatever you have to offer, offering that specifically rather than saying, what can I do to help? And then aside from that, just saying, I'm here if you need me. Sometimes they just want someone to cry with, talk to, who's not going to try and fix them or give them advice.
I can't thank you both enough for your time today. The insight that you have provided into your program and the amazing work you do is fantastic, but also just your personal stories and how the amount of growth that you've both gone through yourselves during this whole process is really insightful, both for me as someone who's starting out in this industry and also just as a parent and a mother. Just to hear your stories has been really lovely. So I can't thank you enough. Is there anything else that you feel like you'd like to share?
Yeah, just quickly, Kristy touched on don't just be there for a few months. I think in terms of children, so when someone dies, it's almost a novelty to them because everyone's around. Family, friends, interstate, overseas, they come to the funeral, they come to the wake, they're there for the family. And I don't know if this is research backed or not, but what we find with families is that grief really kicks a child in the pants 6 months and after, because everyone literally has got on with their life, as you do, and that's when the child says, well, I'm not the centre of attention anymore, no one's here, family, relatives have gone back to their home country or hometown, and it's just me and my family. And as Kristy said, her own experience living in a household who are grieving, it's, as a child, you kind of do make that about yourself. So if you're going to be a good friend or a good relative, be there for post the 6 months. Like that's 6 months is such a blur, and especially for the parents, but that first 6 months is such a blur. If you can make sure you're there post the 6 months and beyond, that's when you're going to have real impact, especially on the children. That's in essence, that's why I don't know if we still do this, but that's why we don't allow kids to come to our program straight after a death, because it's just too fresh. We usually wait a minimum, 4 to 6 months, because that's when grief is really set in. The harsh reality is their reality.
Also, prior to that, they're just in shock. So anything you're trying to feed into their little brains, it's going to go one in one ear and out the other. So
yep.
Giving them that space. But yeah, you're right, James. It's the greatest impact is going to be the year later, and that child is really.
And I think that's really important for people to hear, because they just assume that it's immediately after that they need to be there to support the families. But thank you for sharing that it really is not the time where people can really, because as you said, they are in shock. So thank you so much for letting us know that it's that period after that's where it really hits hard.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much again, Kristy and James. I can't thank you enough. It's been wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Don't Be Caught Dead. brought to you by Critical Info. If you liked the episode, learnt something new, or were touched by a story you heard, we'd love for you to let us know. Send us an email, even tell your friends. Subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. If you can spare a few moments, please rate and review us as it helps other people to find the show. Are you dying to know more? Stay up to date with Don't Be Caught Dead by signing up to our newsletter and follow us on social media. Head to don'tbecaught.dead.com for more information and loads of resources.